Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Today, we're going to talk about whether or not everyone is welcome in Idaho. I know it seems like a trifling issue, but it is an issue, and it's because there are teachers, among others, who would like to push an ideological agenda under the guise of we're just trying to be welcoming to everybody. But there's a little bit more to it than that. I've got details coming up.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. Earlier this year, the Idaho legislature passed a law that would limit ideological expressions in classes, in particular, basically bringing ideology into the classroom where it really doesn't need to be. Now, this isn't just, LGBT, rainbow flags, and otherwise inclusive messages, which have kind of been that's been the go-to position of people on the political left. And they've pushed what I think most would agree is a pretty radical agenda to the kids. And it's hard to pretend that that's not happening when it actually is. So when we talk about limiting ideological expression, just understand this is not about, we got to go punish the gay kids and make them feel bad. This would extend to teachers hanging, wearing a MAGA hat. It's a political statement, or, otherwise things that are very overtly political. We can see why it would be wise to keep those things separate, right? Well, when you care about the right things and you care about them enough, as Mayor McLean in Boise has shown us, rules are optional. In fact, laws are optional. In fact, we can do whatever we want as long as our intentions are pure. Does that sound familiar? It seems to like the Jacobins of the French Revolution had kind of a similar way of thinking. So I've got a lot of information to share here. Let's dive right into it. We start with the story from KTVB. Boise School District issues memo welcoming the Everyone is Welcome Here poster, saying it affirms a foundational principle of public education that every student, regardless of background, is welcome. Now, look, I'm not trying to be pedantic to ask this, but wasn't that always the message? At what point was that not the message of any program that was open to children, particularly government school? I mean, how many times have we heard this? For everybody? It's constitutional. Everybody has to have a public education. So why do we need an overt sign? I mean, it's kind of like a used car dealer, most honest used car dealer in town. If they got to tell you, then maybe there's something a little bit hinky. Anyway, let's move on here. The story from KTVB starts out telling us that the Boise School District announced that it will continue supporting teachers who display "Everyone is Welcome Here" posters in their classrooms, directly contradicting guidance from Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador. Remember, because they care enough, they don't have to follow rules that the rest of us do. The Attorney General's office recently determined that the signs violate a new law that prohibits the display of flags or banners with political viewpoints. Well, how do we make that connection? I'm glad you asked, because Attorney General Raul Labrador will make that for us here in just a few moments. In the Thursday memo distributed to families and staff, the Boise School District stated, the Everyone is Welcome Here sign affirms a foundational principle of public education that every student, regardless of their background, is legally entitled to dignity, respect, and a sense of belonging in their school community. And again, I'm going to ask, where was that being taught otherwise? I mean, answer if you can, but I don't think it just doesn't make sense. Now, the district characterized the signs as reaffirming legal and ethical obligations to provide discrimination-free educational environments, unless, of course, you're a conservative or you wear a shirt that says there are only two genders, male and female. That's another story. Writing "Everyone is Welcome Here" is the law. It's not a political statement. That's some nice sophistry on their point, but let's talk about why Attorney General Raul Labrador was right to clarify this and insist you guys need to follow the law. He writes, this spring, this is an editorial that was published by Fox News by Attorney General Labrador. This spring, an Idaho teacher displayed a sign in her classroom that read, "Everyone is welcome here." Now, on its face, he says, the message appears neutral, simple, positive words that seem apolitical, but the design reveals its true purpose, colorful letters above imagery designed to signal adherence to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dang it, that DEI just does not want to go away. The rainbow colors and progressive symbols accompanying these messages make their political purpose unmistakable. And again, for parents who've been paying attention, this is not like, oh, it's just some craze, it's the Red Scare, Joe McCarthy. No, this is legit going on in the classrooms, and it needs to stop. Well, these classroom displays, says Attorney General Labrador, reflect a broader ecosystem of political resistance groups launched in protest of the political rise of President Donald Trump. The All Are Welcome Here movement, founded in November 2016 by progressive activists in Minnesota, explicitly states its mission is supporting a just, inclusive, and equitable environment, while donating thousands of dollars to progressive causes, including the ACLU. The organization openly declares to show our support for our transgender family, friends, and neighbors. We're also donating 5% of our online sales to Transforming Families of Minnesota, an organization dedicated to advancing transgender ideology among children and families. Oh, so it's just, there's kind of in cahoots with these folks. Well, what more should we think of it? Now, Attorney General Raul Labrador says related movements like Everyone is Welcome also incorporate those symbols from the intersex inclusive pride flag, and they promote LGBTQ plus ideology through educational messaging. A simple visit to any of these organizations' websites reveals their unmistakably political nature, complete with progressive activism, social justice messaging, and ideological programming that extends far beyond genuine hospitality. Yeah, can you see it? It's totalitarianism wrapped in manners. And if we all just do this and obey, why everything, but essentially it's you can think this, you can't think that. Very totalitarian in what it's actually promoting. So even the idea that everyone is welcome here, not if you don't have the right to inclusive ideology. But now Raul Labrador asks, when the teachers display signs that bear the very same names as these political organizations, well, what are parents supposed to think about that? He says the situation in Idaho isn't unique. The Trump administration recognized it was dangerous enough to ban from federal classrooms and K through 12 schools through executive order. That's been spreading through what's been spreading through classrooms nationwide. And across America, educators have transformed learning spaces into venues for DEI messaging disguised as inclusion. Idaho responded with legislation prohibiting political displays in public classrooms, a law that passed overwhelmingly. The fundamental question is, do parents or schools control children's moral education? Idaho chose parents. So at its core, Attorney General Labrador says diversity, equity, and inclusion judge individuals by group identity rather than merit. They divide people into oppressor and victim categories based on immutable characteristics and prioritize equal outcomes over equal opportunity. This is Marxism. This is cultural Marxism. For years, activists have systematically embedded this political messaging throughout school systems under the banner of inclusion and equity. So when he says it's not just innocently everyone is welcome, he's right. But especially these who adhere to this rainbow ideology, they're especially welcome. In fact, we have some videos and books and things we'd like you to see, just in case you're curious and want to explore that further. Yeah, that's twisted and that's wrong. And teachers should not be engaging in that kind of activism. Idaho's response writes, the Attorney General was precise. It was constitutionally grounded. The law prohibits displays representing political, religious, or ideological views on school property. Now, you're going to hear a former Attorney General in just a moment take this to the most ridiculous ends ever. But this is what the political left is doing and intends to do. This is why they want to cast shade at Attorney General Labrador for standing up and saying, stop bringing these political messages into kids' schooling. Let's educate them as opposed to indoctrinate them. He says the Everyone is Welcome Here sign clearly falls within this prohibition by advancing political messaging. Parents possess the primary right to direct their children's upbringing and education, a principle the Supreme Court established in Pierce v. Society of Sisters and has reaffirmed consistently. Now, he says Idaho schools have always welcomed every child. Again, that's the default setting. If teachers need political signs to make every student feel included, they've missed the fundamental purpose of education. Idahoans spoke through their elected representatives against DEI, and they expect that state law will be enforced as written without bending to activist pressure. That's a pretty reasonable explanation, but here's what a former Attorney General by the name of Jim Jones has to say. Well, he says Labrador made two major errors in his conclusion. First and foremost, he says the law specifies its purpose is to maintain a neutral and inclusive environment for all students. And here the sophistry begins. What could possibly be more neutral and inclusive than a sign saying that everyone in the classroom is welcome to be there, especially if it's done in the colors and language and supported by the same organizations that have been pushing all of this LGBT rainbow stuff into the classroom and into kids' lives. Yeah, I'm sure it's just a coincidence, and it's just totally neutral and inclusive and not at all attached to any political agenda. Try again, Jim. He says the debate transcends a display in a classroom. Actually, this is Attorney General Labrador. In response, he describes how this debate transcends what's on display in the classroom. It determines whether America preserves the principle that parents have the right to guide their children's education. The choice is simple. Do we trust parents to raise their children, or do we surrender that sacred responsibility to government educators with political agendas? Attorney General Labrador says Idaho chooses parents. Now, back to the former Attorney General. Jim Jones was Attorney General for 8 years. And he says the second error that the AG made was improperly reading an intent into the words used on the classroom sign. Were the words of the sign to be reviewed by a court, particularly with the sophists such as Jim Jones, it would give us their plain, usual, and ordinary meaning. Well, you know something, Jim? We as human beings actually have the capacity to figure that out ourselves. We don't need robes. We don't need a Juris Doctorate degree. We actually have intellect and the ability to understand. But thank you for being willing to tell us all what it means, as if we were a bunch of snails just spinning circles and leaving slime trails on the sidewalk. Anyway, the literal words used on a document, he says, are the best guide to their intent. Labrador only reached his erroneous conclusion by reading a nefarious intent into the four simple words on the sign. Again, look at who promotes those words and how they use them to promote their agendas. But wait, it gets worse. It gets worse. Let's take this sophistry to a new level. The legislature also deserves a mention for its shoddy workmanship. The statute in question is a mishmash designed to intimidate schools more than to prohibit or to pinpoint prohibited content. No, it's not. It's just saying keep that crap out of the classroom. The language is vague and all-encompassing. And here's where Jim really goes off into fantasy land. It prohibits content related to a vast array of political, ideological, and religious subject matter from being displayed on classroom walls. It equates several words that have somewhat related but distinct meanings, views, viewpoints, ideologies, and expressions. Oh, the lawyer is parsing words now. But let's see, what words would he ban? Well, by prohibiting political views, viewpoints, ideologies, and expressions, Jim tells us the entire range of historical phrases appears to be banned. Now, appears. This is in his opinion, but he's not even coming from a position of authority. Just this is Jim's opinion. We should see these phrases banned. We could see these phrases banned too. All men are created equal. Blue lives matter. Really? Jim, what about black lives? Give me liberty or give me death. Make America great again. Blah, blah, blah. He's throwing all of these political platitudes out there. But wait, he has one more to throw at us just in case to really scare us. The prohibition of religious expressions, ideologies, viewpoints, and views would likely, again, not would, but in his opinion might, perhaps at some point under the proper circumstances, keep the 10 Commandments off classroom walls, which he says, in his view, would be in keeping with the Founding Fathers' intention for keeping a separation between church and state. Well, you got that one wrong too, Jim, but that's okay. But he says other phrases with religious overtones would likely be banned, like love thy neighbor, in God we trust, and the like. So let us peddle our agenda. Let us bring our ideology to your kids. Let us indoctrinate your kids. And don't you dare point out that it's happening, or else we'll say that you're being less than inclusive. Look, the bottom line is, when taxpayer funds are being used to provide public education, everyone is welcome in those classrooms. That is the unspoken rule. That's what representative government is supposed to do, is represent all of us. But it doesn't mean that everybody gets their way and everybody has primacy over other people. And it doesn't mean that these ideological activists should be able to come into the classroom and try to deceive children into pursuing things that the activist wants them to pursue. It just doesn't make sense. The Attorney General was right. Idaho traditionally has been a place where people understood that they were welcome. It's like the old saying, back where I come from, we didn't need a sign that says men working, to tell us there was road work going on. We could tell by looking at them. Likewise, if you have to tell people everyone is welcome here, you're implicitly admitting that in some way your thinking would exclude people. The default setting for most Idahoans is sure, come, be welcome. But let's focus on learning as opposed to teaching the kids the latest kink. What do you think? I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see.
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this